All right, let's go ahead and get started. So, good morning, everyone. My name is Colleen DeLang. I am an instructor here at My Real Source. Great to see so many people. Hello, Mr. Kraft. Hello, Holly. Hello, Melanie. Got a few more people jumping in here right now. First and foremost, before we get started, I just want to make sure that you are able to hear me and see me okay. At this point, you should be able to see my screen as well as myself. And I want to point out that at any time today, if you have any questions about anything we're covering, you can actually open up your GoToWebinar panel and you can type right in that questions box. So we had a couple more people that were just having a little bit of difficulty logging in, but I think we've got everybody here now. So again, my name is Colleen, and before we get started, I just want to make sure that someone can pop in the questions box for me and let me know that you can see and hear me okay. Great to see you on today's call, Mr. Kraft. It's nice meeting you up in your beautiful Caseville office recently. All right, I don't see anybody popping anything in the questions, so I do want to make sure that you are able to hear me. All right, thanks, David. Hope that you're doing well. Hope things are well in beautiful Caseville. Fantastic. Thanks for letting me know that you can see and hear me okay. I was helping a couple people get logged in, so I apologize. We're starting just a couple minutes late. But my goal today is really to show you some time-saving tips and techniques in writing transactions faster, making it easier. I myself know probably a little bit more about transactions than most because I worked at Zipform, a forms company, for many years. Zipform is now part of the Lone Wolf companies who also make TransactionDesk and Authentisign, and that's really what we're going to look at today. We're going to look at some time-saving tips and techniques that really make writing a transaction easier. Now, I wish I could be standing, especially at your office, Mr. Kraft, wish I was up there in beautiful Caseville today. But since I'm not in front of you, I want this to be as interactive as possible. So feel free at any time if you have a question or you need to see something again, or you just need something repeated, you can go right into that questions box, which at this point should be minimized on the right-hand side of your screen, kind of like a red or red arrow. And you can pop in a question, or if you just need to see something again, feel free, don't hold your questions all to the end. You can jump right in there and that'll let me know if I've missed something or if you need a little more clarity, okay? Now, if you're like me, as an agent, I take a lot of these classes, and then all of a sudden, a month from now, I need to use let's say that one-click transaction option. I can't remember exactly where did that lady with the fuzzy hair say that was. So keep in mind, I'm actually recording this class. So if you miss anything along the way today, you can actually see this right on our YouTube channel. If you're interested, I can even email you the link after class if you just let me know in that questions box. All right, so with that, we're going to go ahead and get started, but I'm going to actually open it up to try to make it as interactive as possible. So if anyone on today's call has an active listing that's in the Paragon system, you can actually type that address. We'll give you just a minute. You can type that address into the questions box. And not only will it give you more exposure for your listing, it'll show it to a bunch of agents and brokers. So again, if you have an active listing that you want to use as our example today, it's a great idea to go ahead and give it a little more exposure. Simply type the address into the questions box, and we'll use that as our sample. If I don't get one in about a minute, we'll just randomly grab one. But really, my goal today is to show you a couple things when writing a transaction. And for me, the hardest thing was knowing where to start. And what I mean by that is if you are starting on the purchase side of a transaction. So let's say I just went up and I showed David Kraft's listing up in Caseville. I'm all excited about it. My buyer loved it. We're ready to write an offer. The last thing that I want to do as an agent is go in and have to fill out all of that information that David's already put into the system, right? I want to do a one-click transaction. I literally want to click a button and pull in things like the legal description, the property address. I want to pull all of that in so I don't have to rekey any information. So I don't see anybody adding an address of an active listing here. So I guess I will go ahead and grab one. Again, it's your last chance if you want to throw in a listing address for us to use today, even if it's pending. You can do that as well. If you have an active or pending address, you can pop that in the questions and we'll use that one for an example. Okay, if not, we'll just grab one randomly. So again, the point here is the hardest thing when I started using Transaction Desk was really where to start. If you're on the purchase side, well, then starting from the listing that's already in the MLS is perfect because it will import all of that data right into my transaction. If however, I'm on the listing side, well, I don't want to trust that an agent has entered all of that information exactly. I actually want to pull that from tax records. So, all right. So since I didn't get any address from anybody on our call, trying to keep it as interactive as I can here, I am going to simply just grab one from our new listings monitor over here. The listings monitor is a great way to simply grab a quick listing. So we're just going to grab this one on Erky here. So let's say that I have, we're going to pretend that this is Mr. Kraft's listing. I just showed it and buyer loved it. And now I want to write an offer. And it doesn't matter whether it is a real comp transaction or a my real source transaction. We actually have 97% of the state listings right in your home MLS. So it doesn't really matter where the listing is. We are literally 3 MLSs away from giving you all of the data you need to see for the entire state. And I don't know about you, but with buyers being able to see it on Zillow and Realtor.com and all these other places, I say it's about time that we actually can see more information and give the consumer more information than they can see on their own. And it is about time. All right. So when you're looking at this listing, and we're going to pretend that Mr. Kraft just listed this, I showed it, buyer loved it. Really what I'm looking for is the easy button. So the easy button kind of looks like this splash or this tidal wave. Actually, I'm going to turn off my fuzzy hair here so that you can actually just see the screen in full. That button that I'm referring to as the easy button, that is actually this blue, kind of looks like a splash, and it will say start transaction. It's actually the logo for Transaction Desk. But the idea is when you click that easy button, it's now pulling you right into Transaction Desk for that specific listing. Now, here's the key. If you are a broker or at a brokerage, having your template set up is really going to be the key here. If I'm in a hurry and I want to take a new listing, the last thing I want to do, especially in my company, because we seem to have more forms than I have ever seen at any brokerage, the last thing I want to do is have to search through hundreds of forms and try to find the forms that my broker requires. So in this case, what I really want to do, and if you are a broker or an agent, I'm going to show you how to do this. What I really want to do is I want to select my company buy package or my company listing package. So that's going to know exactly what forms my brokerage requires and I don't miss anything. Now, if you are a really advanced broker, you can even require placeholders where documents have to be returned to your front desk, have to be uploaded. At my company, we use a separate system for that called Command. But if you have a brokerage and you want to make sure that you're getting that paperwork back, you can also set up those placeholders right here in Transaction Desk. All right, so I'm going to say that I'm going to apply my buyer package here because obviously it's already been listed. Then the last thing I want to do is I want to decide who I am in the transaction. Well, because I'm working with the buyer and I know Mr. Kraft already listed it, I'm going to say that I am the selling agent. I'm also going to leave the use wizard checked. And the reason I do that is once you use the wizard a few times, you'll get so used to it that you could actually put all of those same functions in one easy to use dashboard, which I'm going to show you how to do today. And you can do everything right from that dashboard. So for me, when I'm getting comfortable with a new program, like let's say you're using Canva, or let's say you're using any new program, what I like about that is I kind of like the wizard to walk me through a couple times. But as an agent, every time I want to grab an addendum or something easy, last thing I want to do is go through a wizard. So I'm going to show you how to actually use the wizard once or twice, but to set up all the functionality on one easy to use dashboard so you don't have to do those extra steps. Well, let's start off with the wizard today so you can kind of see the idea. So I've now pulled in the data from that listing. What I'm going to do now is just simply hit that create button, and I'm going to start filling out my forms with all the great information that Mr. Kraft has already put in there for us. All right, and I'm going to use yours next because I now see, and I think that's the beautiful one Al was just showing me too, Mr. Chris. I will use that. All right, so on the details page, here's where the magic starts to happen. So because we did that one-click transaction, I'm going to just shrink this down a little bit so you can see it a little bit better. Hopefully that helps a little bit. Because I've done that one-click transaction, do you see how much information is now coming over for me? So for instance, it's already filling in the street number, street name, the MLS number, when it was built, the school district, the city, the county, the lengthy legal description, the tax number, all of that information, the subdivision it's located, even bringing over comments from the MLS, all of that information is flowing right from the listing. So I'm saving myself time by not having to rekey all that basic information. When you are looking at this wizard here, keep in mind the wizard is generic. So whether you are on the listing side or the sales side, the wizard screens are going to be the same. And why that's important is obviously if Mr. Claff just listed this for 275,000, I already see all of that right here. But what I want to do is I want to go over now and fill out my side of the transaction. So for instance, there's a few things that can't be auto-populated. Like for instance, only my buyer knows what he wants to pay, right? There's nowhere to pull that from. So I'm going to go to purchaser information here, and I'm going to say, okay, Mr. Claff listed it for 275. We're going to do 279. Well, because last week I wrote 2 offers and got beat out by 13 on one and 9 on the other. So we're going to go a little higher here. If you have an EMD, you can also put that in. And again, that's going to carry over to all of your forms for you. So kind of think of this, if you're a zip form user from way back, this is kind of like your cover sheet, your zip form cover sheet. Or if you've used .loop previously, it's kind of the same concept. You're kind of filling out your cover sheet that's going to auto-populate all of your forms. All right, so the next one, here's a little cheat that not too many people know. So if I'm going to ask Mr. Kraft if we can have the stove, the fridge, the washer and dryer, if I just add that right here onto the property includes, it will carry over to all of the forms that talk about what the appliances are. Like, as I mentioned, I think our company has like the most forms of any company in the world. So the last thing I want to do is go into 5 different forms and add the same information. Same thing with property excludes. Let's say when Mr. Claff listed it, had a huge play structure in the back and we want that removed, or maybe an above ground pool, we want that removed or excluded from our sale. We can actually put that in the excluded field and that will carry over as well. Now I'm going to be honest, as an agent, there is one that I generally don't fill out, and that's the total financing here. So you can put in the financing fields, you can put in, obviously what they're going to pay, what type of financing, there's fields for all of that. But generally, especially if you're doing like a 3%, and this kind of depends on if you're doing like an FHA deal and they're doing 3%, if your brokerage allows you to put in a percentage, this is kind of more formatted to a number. So this is the only field that I don't recommend filling out on the cover, but really everything else, the more information you put into your cover sheet or your wizard, the more information will be filled out on all of your documents. So kind of keep that in mind. So you can scroll down and you'll see just about everything, but there are basically 5 steps in the wizard. The first step is obviously the property information and what your buyer wants to pay. So now we're going to jump to our next step in the wizard. And this is the transaction dates. So basically when the property was listed is already filled in. When our offer dates, I'm going to say we're making today our offer date. We're only going to give them, let's say, 2 days for them to respond to us. So I'm going to say we're going to give them till, let's say, Saturday at 5 p.m. to accept our offer. You can put in, thanks to TRID, you can do things like commitment dates, when their acceptance dates, possession dates, closing dates, all of those can be added right here. And that will actually carry all of these things over into your forms. Now, I like to keep this, everybody kind of learns technology at a different level, right? And so some people are really just getting started. When I went up to Mr. Kraft's office, he had a great system all designed that he put into place. And so he already had that. I've gone to other brokerages where they really haven't used any systems. But really the key here is I'm going to try to keep this class kind of middle of the road. We're not going to go too advanced. We're not going to go too basic. We're going to kind of follow along that middle of the road. But I do want to show you something that has really helped me because I obviously work at the MLS full time. I still sell. I was just out showing houses last night. And so being so busy, I find that sometimes it's really easy to miss something. Like you forgot, geez, I didn't put the lockbox on, or oh, geez, I forgot to order the sign. Or for me, I always remember those things. The one I always forget is the final water read. Like at the last minute, I'm like, oh, geez, I forgot to tell them to order the final water read, or I didn't order the final water read. So sometimes those automated reminders can be really, really helpful. Now, this is a totally optional thing. Sometimes I show this and people think, oh, geez, that's kind of overwhelming. I like to show it because the majority of us are looking for those ways to streamline things, especially if you are on a team. Or you just maybe have someone in your office that is in charge of ordering the signs or in charge of, running out and putting the lockbox on. So this is a completely optional step. But why I like it is it actually works off just basically the dates of the transaction. So let me show you. If you're looking to take technology to the next level with your forms, so let's say you're not just looking to fill out your forms or the easy way to do that. Let's say you also want to integrate it with your team. You want those email reminders so you don't, like I do, forget to order the final water read or something like that. You can actually create what's called a task. The task can be something that's automatically applied to a transaction. And there's also checklists. So if you are a broker, you can set up a series of tasks. So tasks kind of like this. Mr. Kraft just took a brand new listing. Almost called you Claft and Kraft. I get those mixed up all the time. Just took a brand new listing, and part of their office checklist is to obviously sign the listing information, the listing documents. They want to then put the lockbox on, then install the sign, then maybe schedule an open house or a broker tour. So he's got a series of things that he's going to do. That's really what a checklist is. It's those tasks that can automatically be applied to a transaction just to send you those automated reminders so nothing falls through the cracks. So let's actually take a look at how a task is created. And you'll notice, even though I'm in the wizard, right over here to the right, there's all of these options. And if you have your GoToWebinar panel open, it may be hiding these. So you might want to click that red or orange arrow if it isn't already minimized. See, there's the wizard, the dashboard, contacts, things like that. One of those options is the tasks. So I'm going to leave the wizard for just a second. And you don't have to do these, but I think once you see how easy they are, a lot of people do kind of get excited about them. So I'm going to say that I want a reminder to, let's make it nice and easy, to install the sign on every new listing. Okay, you can put a description in, but really in real estate, there is no specific date, right? It's not like every October 1st, you're going to install the sign, right? It's really related to something that is being done on the transaction. So you could do related to a transaction date, no due date, or related to something being completed. So once you sign the listing contracts, you can say that you want someone in your office to be notified to put up your sign. But we're going to go ahead and we're going to say we're going to do it related to a transaction date. I want a reminder to go out, let's say 1 day after our listing. So I'm going to say 1 day after our list date, I want an email reminder So we'll say we could do one hour before, one day before. But I want a reminder, and then here are my teammates' names. Okay, so if I have multiple people on my team, I can even assign this to a specific person on my team. So it will then send an email reminder that they need to install the sign. Remember, this is totally optional. It's not like you have to do it, but if you have a team or if you just have someone at your office who does things like that, or maybe schedules the photos to be taken, that's an easy way to sort of bring everybody together and send out those automated reminders. All right, so we've got all of our dates in. We're on step 2 of our wizard. Step 3 is actually the most important step. Step 3 is really where you're bringing all the parties together. And if you do this step correctly, this is where you can eliminate a lot of time when it comes to sending things out for e-signatures. The last thing, when I'm in a hurry and I'm writing up a purchase agreement, the last thing I want to have to do is move all of those stupid little tags onto the document where everybody needs to sign. So here's your next time-saving tip. If you simply add in the contacts of the transaction and who they are, the role they're playing. Are they a buyer? Are they a seller? Are they an attorney? If you add them in, I promise you it will eliminate all of that tagging because they're pre-tagged. So let me show you exactly what I mean. So of course it shows me and my brokerage. Obviously it's going to show the listing agent and the listing brokerage here. But the next thing I want to do is I want to add my side of the transaction. So a couple ways you can do that. We've already added you, so you don't have to do that. If you've worked with this, maybe it's an investor that Mr. Kraft has worked with before, he's going to pull them in, he did another deal with them. You could pull it right from your contacts. You could pull it from your Google contacts. But in this case, I want to show you how to create a brand new transaction. Now, I've asked Transaction Desk for a early Christmas present, so I'm going to let you know there is going to be a 5th option here. Very soon, you're going to be able to even pull from your Paragon contacts. So you're probably thinking, lady with the fuzzy hair, why is that important? Well, think about your workflow. So when you get a buyer, I'm going in and I'm plugging them into the MLS, into the Collab Center. So every time a new listing with their criteria comes onto the market, immediately it sends it out to my buyer. If you have not done that, I recommend you take our Collab Center class. We'll show you how to set it up so it automatically sends that listing to your buyer. It can CC you on it. It can even drop it into showing time card. It's really cool. So with the Collab Center, you've got your buyer getting all these homes. Okay, now you take them, you show them the houses, and guess what? They're ready to write. Why should I have to re-enter all the buyer's information? It just never made sense to me. So what we've done is we've just finished completing an integration that is going to pull that contact right from Paragon, where you've already got them set up on that prospecting, and it's going to allow you to pull all that information in seamlessly so you don't have to re-enter anything, which I thought was a really good idea. But in this case, since that's not here yet, we're going to go ahead and create a brand new transaction contact. All right, so the most important thing here is, who is the contact? What role are they playing? Now you can add custom roles in. As you can see, I put in ABC Realty. You could put in appraisal companies, but really the one I want here, I want to actually let the forms know where the buyer's going to be signing. So I want to say this is our buyer, and we're going to call this Barry buyer, just to make it easy. And of course, you would put in Barry Buyer's email address. Now, put in my email address because I want to show you some examples today throughout the class. But then normally, in most situations, that's all you need to do. And you could put in your buyer's address if you wanted. But really, in 90% of the cases, that's all you have to do. There are 3 additional fields, and let me kind of explain what those are for. If Mr. Kraft is writing an offer and he is writing it, and the person is signing Barry Buyer, power of attorney for Sally Sue, or Barry Buyer is signing on behalf of a corporation, or he is the trustee for an estate. A lot of times the attorney wants them to sign not with Barry Buyer. They're not personally buying it, right? They're signing as POA for Sally Smith. So if the name that you want pre-printed, so we're going to say, just to give you an example, this is Barry Buyer, POA, for Sally Smith. If I want that printed underneath the signature line, then that's where I would put that. So for things like corporations, power of attorneys, or trusts, this is one thing you're going to want to know. 90% of the time, probably won't need it. But if they're signing in that exact capacity and you don't want them to have to go in and create a whole new signature, well, really, I want to have that as their preferred signature too. So when they script out their signature, that's how I want it to look. I want it to be Barry Buyer, POA, for Sally Smith. So keep in mind, if it's a situation with a trust, power of attorney, or an estate, that's what those additional lines are set up for. And of course, I like to always have them checked into my address book, because that way when I need an addendum or I need to send them something else, it's very, very simple. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and save our Barry Buyer. And obviously, if Barry Buyer was married or they're buying it, if two people are buying it, you're going to add each contact in separately. All right, going over to step 4. Now, here's where more magic starts to happen. Because we started with our template or our package of forms, we have to go hunt down the purchase agreement or which disclosure my brokerage needs. As I mentioned, we got just a ton of forms. But all of those are really just dropped into place for me. I don't have to go find anything. But let's say, for an example, that there is, let's say Mr. Kraft was working on this deal and he wants a pool addendum. He wants to specify, exactly what's going on with the pool at the time of closing. Well, if I need an additional form, I can hit the add. But right now, and I kid you not, right now there are almost 7,000 forms that are available in all of these libraries. Now, who the heck would want to actually have to search? Now, really, if you have a brokerage library, and by the way, if you are a broker, TransactionDesk can set up your forms so they auto-populate, but no one in their right mind is going to want to have to go in and look for those forms. So you can actually go right up to the top here and just type in a keyword. If I'm looking for a pool addendum, well, I can see, oh, here's my company pool addendum. I just simply want to add that one specific form in. I'm kind of old school. I've been doing this 23 years. And I remember when I started, I remember they were always like, never send out anything until the agency disclosure. So it'd always be your first form. I know it's kind of old school now, but so if you wanted to rearrange these forms, all you really have to do is grab that thumbnail, that picture of the form, and drag and drop it into the order that you want. So even if your brokerage doesn't have them set up the way you like, you can still drag and drop them right into the position you want them to be in. If you are looking at a bunch of forms, and especially when it comes to agency, there's a lot of lawsuits going on across the country that are talking about agency and how agency may be changing over time. I'm a big fan of Vendor Alley and notorious Rob Hahn and Greg Robertson. Been lucky enough to work with some of those people, and it is amazing as things keep changing, more and more disclosures regarding agency and regarding commission and commission addendums. There's all of these different changes, and a lot of the forms now have very similar titles. So if I'm looking at this disclosure of agency and I'm not sure, is that the one I want, I can always go to the menu dots to the right, and you can do a form preview, which basically allows you to look at the form and I can say, oh yeah, it's the one we use for our company. That's the one I want to use. So keep in mind, if you're not sure and you kind of want to take a look at the form, as you can see, we've got a ton of forms. I don't always use all of these. So sometimes I like to simply remove them. Remember, you can always go to the menu dots to the right, simply hit preview or delete, and you can remove it so you don't have to fill that particular form out. I have a little OCD, so I kind of always like them in my certain order. It just makes it work better for me. Okay. So the very next thing is I'm going to one of the challenges that I think I faced when I started using TransactionDesk was forms and documents. Now, when I got my license, they were kind of the same thing. A form was a document was a form. It all went in a transaction. Didn't seem like it was any different. However, when they talk about forms in TransactionDesk, it is different. So let me explain. A form in TransactionDesk refers to any form that TransactionDesk has set up that auto-populates and that you can fill in the blanks. So you're probably thinking, okay, lady with the fuzzy hair, then what's a document? So in step 5, what is the document section? And that is any outside form you want to bring in, whether it's a copy of the EMD, whether it's a pre-approval letter, whether it's pre-title, or maybe a home warranty that's filled out. Whatever it happens to be, you can add those things in. But here's a really cool thing that we completed, and I kind of want to show it to you. So I'm going to bounce back to the MLS for just a second. In the MLS, when an agent adds in a listing, one of the required things is that they upload the associated docs, right? The seller's disclosure, the lead-based paint disclosure, maybe you have a bank addendum or you have an offer submission sheet, whatever it happens to be, those go in associated docs. So the old process was you would have to open up the associated docs. You would have to go in and save the seller's disclosure to your computer, save the lead-based paint disclosure to your computer, then pull it into TransactionDesk so that your buyer could sign everything all at once, right? Okay, that is not helpful. If it is a one-click transaction and you want it to be easy, well, I want all of those to be imported. So the great news is when you do that one-click transaction that we started off with, so when you go, just kind of remind you what that is, when you go to when you go to that listing, that specific listing, so let me back up, and you click that one-click button that we started our transaction off with. When you click that, it not only imports the data, but it's importing the actual forms in there as well for you. So when I go to the document section, the cool thing is I don't have to go find those. If I click on the seller's disclosure here, this is the seller's disclosure all filled out by the seller from the MLS. I don't have any work to do except to, when I'm sending it out with my purchase agreement, have my buyer review it and sign it. So really easy to import not only the data, but the documents that are corresponding with it as well. So again, if you joined us a little bit late, I know we had a few people jump on late, you're welcome to ask questions. Just put them right in that questions box in your GoToWebinar, or if you need to see something again, just type it right in there and we'll go over it. So the big takeaway here is that documents and forms are different. Documents are things that you can bring in or that we're pulling in from the MLS. And the forms are those fillable forms that you're filling out. Again, don't be afraid to drag and drop those into the order. If you need to add additional forms, you can do that very easily here. But then there are those outside situations. Like let's say that I just went into Mr. Kraft's office, I hand delivered a paper offer. Now the last thing that he wants to do is grab a pen and scratch it all up and then scan it in. No, he really just wants to do the counteroffer in a nice, clean, and easy way. So what he wants to do is he wants to pull that purchase agreement that I've dropped off into TransactionDesk. 1, so he has a copy of it right in the file. But 2, because then it's really easy for him to make those changes or that counter to the purchase agreement. So let's actually do that. So let's say that you have that offer in your hand. It's really easy. It's a drag and drop, and you can actually drag up to 20 files. So if you've got all your listing documents in a file on your desktop, really easy to drag those in. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pretend for just a moment. I have a 10-year-old, so we do a lot of pretending here. And I'm literally going to grab that purchase agreement. We're going to pretend that's a purchase agreement. And I'm going to drop it right onto that drag and drop strip. And what you're going to notice is that loaded right away. It's now part of the documents in this transaction. You can also, if you're like me, let's say you've got a whole bunch of documents on your desktop, you can click on that drag and drop. Right. And you can also, let's say, if I have a purchase agreement here, we'll say the buyer's agency. But again, you can add up to 20. You can pull those in very quickly. Because I didn't have an easy to grab purchase agreement, I kind of want to show you how now to do that counteroffer. So I brought those documents in. Here's where it gets really good. I now want to use this purchase agreement. And what I want to do is I want to basically counter it so it looks professional. It's not, chicken scratched and I'm trying to send back. If I go to my purchase agreement, the first thing you can see is one, it's auto populating a lot of information already for us, that stove, that fridge, that washer, that dryer, all of that. The next thing I want to do though is I want to use this painter's palette or this markup tool because I now want to counter this offer. So I'm going to pretend I got this offer again from Mr. Kraft. We're going to go ahead and maybe we're happy with everything, but maybe we don't want to leave the stove, the fridge, the washer, and the dryer. Blow this up a little bit so hopefully you can see it a little bit better. I know it's hard on the webinar. So if that's the case, I'm going to go up to these tools right here at the top. I'm going to pick the tool I want to use. Now, for my brokerage, we just have to have all of the parties initial that change. But see your broker on your policy. I had somebody from, I think it was Midland on the other day, and they were saying, gosh, we aren't allowed to use that document. We have to have a whole separate addendum for any changes. So see your broker on what your policy is. It can change from brokerage to brokerage and association to association. But why I want to show you this is really most of the time, the things that we're changing are, price, terms, things like that. So right down here where it says price, this is obviously something that I want to change, but I don't want to just draw a line through it, right? I want to make the change here. So I'm going to pull this up just a little more to make it easier. So we've got 279,000. And Mr. Kraft says, you know what? I'm not taking a penny less than 285. Okay, no problem. So we're going to change our offer now. We're going to go to text. What I like to do is I like to click on the text option, and I like to go where there's a little more blank area, because if you do it right on top, sometimes it's hard to see. So I'm going to say, okay, Mr. Kraft, we're going to give you that 285. But you can see with my OCD, I'm going to be honest, I could never in good conscience send something that looked like that. I get them. I get them from agents, which I don't really love. But it would look terrible if you just laid that huge number. You can't read it. You can't see it. It's just a hot mess. So little tip here. If you right click, it will give you the option to change your font size. So I'm going to say that's probably a 9-point font. Oh, it's pretty close. Maybe 8. Let's go 8. You can also change the font. So maybe I don't want to use Arial. Maybe I want to use, say that's a little closer. You can also bold it. So I can say we bold it so it looks a little closer to what's here. But then what I do is, again, if I laid this on top, that looks terrible. I hate that. So what I would like to do is I would like to change the background from transparent to solid. Because again, I'm changing my own offer and I want it to match. I want it to look like that's what should go on that line, right? And so you can actually lay it right over. Actually, I probably would make it a little bit longer here. For the sake of time, I won't make it too perfect like I normally would. But the idea is you want to really move it right onto the line where they're not seeing that excess. And I probably would make that actually a little bit bigger. It should probably be one more font up. But you can kind of see what I'm saying. You can actually make those changes so that it's right on the line and it looks a lot more professional than if you just pick up a pen and cross something off. If you want to highlight something, maybe you got your client a 2-year home warranty. You can go ahead and change the color of the highlight. You can highlight the document. Don't worry if you make a mistake. If you right click on it, you can always pull it off very easily. So really easy to make those counters. So hopefully that makes sense. I'm just going to go ahead and close that. And I'll say, yes, I want to save those changes. One of the other things that I am a huge fan of because I'm in the car a lot is a lot of times when I'm sending documents. So let me kind of give you an example. I use a lot of examples and I hope that's okay with everybody because sometimes when you're just saying it, it doesn't make sense. So I try to give you a few examples of what these things are used for. So for case in point, I'm sending all of my documents out to the buyer so they can sign them easily. I don't want to send my seller's disclosure to the buyer, then the buyer's agency to the buyer, and then the purchase, right? I want to have everything all combined into a nice little package. So for me, our buyer agency for our company, and most of the buyer agency that I've seen, they have information between you, the agent and your buyer. So their email address, a lot of times their phone number, what they were looking for, what they were looking to spend. The last thing I want to do is now send that to Mr. Kraft with my offer, right? So, but I've sent them all in one PDF. It's one bundle. So I don't want to send Mr. Kraft my buyer's agency with my buyer's email and phone number and personal contact information and what they were looking to spend, right? That's a document that even though they've signed all together, I don't want that to go to the other side, the co-opting agent. So how, if you have everything signed in one great little PDF, when you're on the road and you want to pull that one page out, how do you do that? And that is with the document slicer. So it's relatively new. It's been around, I think, about a year and a half now. But if you, so let's go to that same document. So let's use our purchase agreement again. So I am going to say that I want to basically change a page or part of the document. I don't want it to go to the co-opting agent. So I'm going to go to where it has this kind of, it looks like a page with 2 pages ripped out. And that's really the goal, is to take some of those pages out, even though my buyer signed everything together, before I send it to Mr. Kraft. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to click on the document slicer. Now you could do this with 1 document or 8 documents. It doesn't matter. I'm just using this one because it's nice and easy. But let's pretend the last 2 pages here were my buyer agency. And I do not want to send the co-opting agent those pages. So I'm going to take this 7-page purchase agreement, but I only want to send Mr. Kraft those 5 first pages. So what I'm going to do is I'm basically creating a new PDF with just the documents that I want to send. And by the way, if you download the TransactionDesk app, it's really easy to do on your phone too. I can't tell you. Now, would I do an entire transaction on my phone? No. Have I? Yes, it's painful. I would not do that. But if you're at, my son plays baseball. If I'm at his baseball game and I want to quickly write up an addendum, or I just want to strike something off the purchase agreement and have everybody sign and agree to it, it's really easy to do that. It's really easy also to pull documents in from your email on your phone. So if you've not gone to your app store and downloaded the Transaction Desk app, by the way, it's one word. I have a lot of people that reach out and say, hey, I put in Transaction Desk, 2 words, they can't find it. So one word, Transaction Desk, download the app. It makes it really simple. But basically what I want to do is shrink that 7 pages to only the 5 pages that I want to send. So I'm going to say counter for Kraft. And I'm going to open up with that particular document. So I'm going to save it as, now you could save it as an original. I never like to do that. I always like to have the history of the document, where we started, what changes were made. You could replace the document altogether. I don't like to do that. I always like to do a save as. I want that whole paper trail. I also in here like to have subfolders. I had a deal die, and I want to be able to put everything of the dead deal in one file folder, but in the same transaction. So if you have a couple deals that go bad, you can go back and see everything that happened within that transaction for your first offer or your second offer or your third offer. It's always a great idea. Or maybe you got 10 offers on a property and you want to have them all in the file, but you only want to work with this specific one, your accepted offer. You can do that too. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and just save this. And basically what I'm doing is, you can see it just took those 7 pages down to just the 5 that I now want to send over to that co-opting agent. So a lot of tools in here. Document slicer is a great one. Doing counteroffers, that's really easy. The forms themselves are there, and anything outside that you want to bring, you can email forms into here. I find the easiest way, quite honestly, is just to drag and drop them. If you have things in Google Docs, you can pull them in from there. But again, if you just want to drag and drop right from maybe somewhere on your desktop, or maybe you have it in your downloads file, you can literally just drag it, drop it onto that drag and drop strip, and it's now added to your transaction. All right, so the good news is you've completed the whole wizard. Now, I know what you're probably thinking, because I would be thinking it. That's a lot of steps, Colleen. It's really, really not. I kind of went over everything backwards and forwards and all of the options. But if you think about what we actually did here today, we started off, just as a recap, We started off with that easy one-click button. It pulled everything over into Transaction Desk, including the seller's disclosure and the lead-based paint. We followed along in the wizard. I'm just going to click here so you can see. We did those 4 steps, but really in your average transaction, once you've clicked that easy button and you've pulled all that data in here and you're on step 1, all of that is really here. So all I would need to do on step 1, just to reiterate, is put in the purchase price and my EMD. Step 2 is the name or the dates in your transaction. Step 3, the most important, is the buyer name and who that person is, that role. Are they a buyer? Are they a seller? Are they an attorney? That's the big key, because that will save you a lot of time as we get into the tagging and sending e-signatures out. It really simplifies the process. Then because we applied our template, all of our forms fell right into place. And lastly, if there's any outside documents that I want to bring in, here's where I'm going to do that. And our seller's disclosure and lead-based paint, they've already done that for us. So pretty simple. Once you've done that and you hit done, as I mentioned, the wizard is awesome and it's great for learning, but really, do I want to do the wizard every single time? And the answer is no, because once you've gone through the wizard a couple times and you know what goes on what screen, I really want to do it from one convenient dashboard. So for instance, if Barry Buyer here is married to Bertha Buyer and I forgot to add her in, I'm just going to go here and I'm going to get that same screen that we looked at in the wizard, but I'm going to do it from one convenient spot. So I'm going to say, okay, they are married and we're going to call her Bertha Buyer. And I'm going to put in Bertha Buyer's email address. Unlike many of the other systems, husbands and wives can share an email address. Some couples who do share an email, it does tell them and they legally accept who they're signing on behalf of. So there's some legal behind that too as well. But the idea is if I want to add a real quick form, I can do that. If I want to add outside documents, I can do that. In my opinion, when you open this up for the very first time, they did not set it up that way. So let me show you how to make this easy dashboard. It's super simple. When you're looking at this lock right here, all you have to do is unlock it and then drag the options over to the right. Now, I'm going to be honest, I didn't add any of the blue. I can do all of that very easily just by on the right or over on the left. What I did want on my dashboard was everything plus one that I could do in the wizard. So I wanted the documents, the forms, the contacts. But there was also one other one that I suggest that you add, and it's the one that says Authentisign. And the reason I suggest you add that, and when I say add it, by the way, let me show you how easy that is. If you want to add something to your dashboard, you're simply going to grab that tag, place it on your dashboard. By the way, you can make them smaller or larger. But the reason I suggest you add Authentisign is this program has smart tagging. What that means is if you send your documents out to be signed by the buyer from this transaction, or even when you're sending something, if you click a button to tie it to the transaction, every signed copy goes right back into this specific file in your Authentisign. So I recently had a seller call me to list their home, and I had sold it to them 3 years ago. So all I had to do was open up that closed file, and I could see everything they signed. I even had their closing package in there. So I could see exactly what they paid, the financing terms, what we put down for everything was there. And everything they sign goes right back into your file automatically. So the ones I recommend for sure are, I like the detail view right here. It's just a little easier. Contacts, Authentisign, forms, and documents. Those are the ones I like right on my dashboard. And don't worry, if you're not following along, remember I'm recording this today, so you can go back and see this, and you can see exactly how we're doing this. When you've got your boxes exactly where you want them, just click that lock button again. Your dashboard is all set up now with exactly the way you want it. All right, so that kind of talks about going through all of the transaction, but what about filling out the forms? Okay, how much auto population is there? So let's actually go into the forms. And by the way, you can go through the wizard again or just quite honestly, much simpler. Just click on the word forms over here to the right. And I want to see what's auto-populating. So I'm just going to click on the purchase agreement. I can see the listing agent, the email address, the agent ID, the address, all of this, tax ID. And remember those things that we added, the stove, the fridge, the washer, the dryer, all of those are carrying over. Our $279 that we filled in as our price. So, and if I put in things like what type of financing, that would be there. So the more information you fill into that wizard, the better it's going to fill out your forms. So once we're here, if I want to add a new form, very easy. If I want to remove a form, easily as well. If I want to save this form or save it as a PDF. Now, one thing to note, if you just try to save this to your desktop, I'm always going to save it as a PDF because you can only alter a form within the system. Everything else is going to save it more as a locked copy, and that's so people can't change it or try to take broker forms and alter them. We never want that. But then there's another option, and quite honestly, for a long time, I could not figure out why I would use the copy function in real estate. But then I was filling out a seller's net the other day, and generally, if I'm filling out a seller's net, I just listed a property up in Beaverton, and I wanted to do a low seller's net and a little bit higher seller's net. So we could kind of do, because I was giving her kind of a price range that I thought. And so you can actually copy things and then just go in and tweak things like what the higher commission would be, or what a lot of that stays the same. The home warranty fees stayed the same. A lot of the, what her mortgage was stayed the same. The address stayed the same. I just wanted to go in, create two copies and make one on a lower sales price and one on a higher. So that's another good example of copying the form. You can add watermarks. You can erase if you've messed up the whole transaction, you just want to wipe everything out and start again, you can do that from here. You can print forms from here. You can send documents via email. I'm going to show you some really cool stuff on the listing side with that. You can fax documents from here. And by the way, it doesn't just have to be forms. My mom called me and she said, hey, can you fax? She doesn't email, as an elderly person in my family, and she said, hey, can you fax the blue cheese recipe over to Gertrude? No problem. You can actually pull it into TransactionDesk. You can fax that out as well. It does keep a history. It does let you know when it was received. So all of that is here. And again, you can mark up documents just like I've already showed you. There is help and support that's available. Remember though, as a My Realtors member, we're not going to send you to the help and support in TransactionDesk. We actually have on staff a lot of realtors. We also have we have John, who's a great tech support resource. I know a few of you have talked to him. He's actually studying for his bar exam. So we've got people who are in the real estate industry who are able to answer your questions, not only on TransactionDesk, but on all of the products that we support, with the exception of Kubacasa, which we just recently released, because that's an app. Obviously, you have to be on your phone and we won't know your passwords for that. So with everything else, whether it's TransactionDesk, Paragon, MarketStats, Cloud CMA, we support that for free as a member benefit, 7 days a week from 9 a.m. to 9 p.m. And a lot of times I take support calls, so don't be surprised if you get myself or Lisa Harris, who's been a great realtor for, I think 32 years now, Dawn Waldrop as well. So we all kind of help out with support calls too, because as agents, we generally have a little more knowledge of maybe why you're trying to do that, or we can show you a shortcut that maybe helped us. So that's why we have a lot of realtors on our support staff. So keep in mind, if you do have a question, I would not use the support here. I would actually just call our support, which is 248-247-1040. If you didn't write it down, don't worry, I'm going to show it all to you at the end. When we go over our webinar video channel too, where you can find this recording. So you can do also things like changing the fonts, changing the text colors. I'm going to be honest, I love this next feature, and a lot of brokers don't use it, and I really don't understand why. Because in my opinion, with today's legal situations that arise so quickly, as a broker, I would think now more than ever, creating the legal language that you want your agents to use has never been more important. So many agents, especially new agents. So new agents, they come into the business, they don't always know the exact terminology for seller concessions or let's say you use an appraisal gap or a lot of times those terminologies get really tricky for agents, especially if they're new. So what if I told you as a broker or as a brokerage, you could actually establish legal clauses that you and your attorney come up with for the agents to use. So let me give you a good example here. Jump down to the bottom of our purchase agreement when it comes to other conditions. So let's say that you are asking for seller concessions. And sometimes you just get that language in there, it's just perfect. And other times you're really struggling, like, how did I say that? It sounded so good before. If you go to the clause library, and I'm just going to use my personal one, you can actually set up folders for your agents to use. Like maybe you have home inspection companies and you want the home inspection clause to be added. Maybe you have a home warranty company and you want them to use that particular home warranty language. Or maybe you're just trying to say something like all appliances will be conveyed at the time of the sale. You can actually go in and check off exactly what you want your agents to use. So I'm going to say my broker wants me to use this one and this one. And instead of me having to guess and create my own legal language, which my broker, Dave Claft, always says, Colleen, you're not an attorney, just use what's already there. This is a great way to apply those clauses without having to rekey them every time. It also makes sure that I'm staying in compliance with how my broker actually wants that worded. If I want to jump from form to form, I get this. This is probably the most asked question. Colleen, I am on the agreement, but that is all I can see. Well, remember, this point right now, we are in the forms editor. We're adding anything that's additional that didn't come over from the actual MLS or from what I filled in the cover. This is where I would add those one-offs, those things maybe that are special or unique to this transaction. So when you're ready to go to the next form, you can see that the purchase agreement ends at page 7. All you're going to do is go to transaction forms here at the top, and you're simply going to click on the next form, the actual title. You don't even have to check them all off. You can just click on the title. And now I can go in and I can review that specific form and add in, yep, I'm working as a buyer's agent, and fill anything out there. Okay, so hopefully that makes sense. Oops, I didn't mean to make it quite that big for you. Hopefully that's going to make sense. And if you do have any questions, again, don't be afraid to just plop them right in that transaction button. Ooh, I zoomed that in really big here. Trying to make that a little smaller. It's a little hard with my GoToWebinar box in the way, so hopefully you can see that. There also right here is those same markup tools. So if you are looking at a document and you want to make a change to it, those markup tools are right up here at the top. So again, if there's something I need to cross off, I can actually do that right from here too. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to leave our editor. I'm going to say that I filled in all of our information that I needed to. Down a little bit, so I'm not, there we go. So that all of the information is filled in. And that is basically an entire purchase side. So if you remember nothing else from this transaction, remember that really all the hard work was done by clicking the easy button and then going through that wizard and simply filling in those additional details. Okay. Oh, great question. Why didn't the selling agent name go into the A? That's a really, really good question. Now, on some documents, you'll see that the agent name automatically just pops right in there. On certain documents, because they could be related to the seller or the buyer. So let's look at this one as a kind of an example. The licensee, if it's a dual agency, let's say, the licensee could be one of either. Because it's not specific to this side of the transaction, it could be a buyer or a seller on this individual form. It does not fill that in. On most forms, though, and if you find forms where it's only set up for a buyer or a seller, on those forms, it should be filling that in for you. And actually, I've been talking to Al LaFord about doing more on the auto tagging so that it automatically has all of those in place for the brokerage forms as well. With all the association forms have it, many of the brokerage forms have it as well. But in this particular case, it was a great question. Mr. Kraft asked why the licensee name doesn't populate here. And the long and short of it is you could auto populate your name there. But the tricky part with this form is the same if I'm working with the buyer as it would be if I'm working with the seller. Obviously, I'm filling out, I could be a dual agent, I'm working with both. So it's not smart enough to know if it is related, if it's the licensee related to the seller or the buyer in this side, because the form is really set up for both. Other forms, like a buyer's agency, it will have your name as the licensee, and it will only be set up, you won't see the seller boxes, right? You'll only see the buy side. So that way it knows that you are the licensee for just the buyer. Because this form could go either way, it's not quite that detailed, unfortunately. Good question, though. Hopefully that answered, hopefully you got what I was trying to say there. Hopefully I explained it okay. All right. So basically we just went through an entire transaction. I would say my average transaction takes about 7 to 9 minutes. It's really not hard. Of course, it's taken a lot longer because I've shown you every bell, every whistle, and everything that it includes. But really, on most transactions, you're looking 7 to 9 minutes from the time you click that easy button to where you're filling out that additional information. So not hard. It took a little bit longer just because I wanted to show you all of the details. And when you're ready to leave that forms editor, you're just going to hit File, Exit, and then that's going to take you back right to your wizard. So hopefully that makes sense. All right, so the next question I get is, so we went over the entire transaction on the purchase side. So just to kind of recap, we started here, click the easy button. Because the information was already in the MLS, I can pull all that data over. But what if you're on the listing side? Do you really want to trust that an agent put in all the right information? At least I don't. I'd rather be able to pull it directly from the tax records or the municipality, and that's what I would recommend. So the big thing in TransactionDesk is if you're on the purchase side, unless it's, let's say, a for sale by owner or new construction that isn't in the MLS, it's always the key to find the listing, click that easy button, and start your transaction. So it pulls the forms, the transaction information, who has it listed, all that carries over. On the listing side, though, that's when we're going to go into our agent toolbox. So remember, all of your great tools that you get through My Real Source are all under this resources key. So I'm going to go into TransactionDesk, our online forms, and I actually want to start a transaction from the tax records. Pull this back up a little bit so you can see it. When I go in, over here to the left, this is going to be where all of my transactions are. Now you saw it kind of opened to this dial. The dial gives you the ability, if you are a broker, you can actually go in and see a brokerage dashboard of what's going on in your office. If you're an agent, you can also see, just your agent files, and you can toggle back and forth as a broker. But I'm going to go over here and I'm going to take a look at this transaction list, if you will. And this is going to have all of the transactions that I've completed. The next thing I want to do is I want to start a transaction from the listing, from the actual record that the municipality has. So I want to start a new listing, but with reliable information. So I'm going to go in and I'm going to hit Add, Create Your Transaction. Kind of what we did before, but there's an extra step here. So I am going to say I want to create a listing transaction for 41539 Wessel Drive. Now, some people will say, well, I want to call it the client name, like Bob Smith. The problem is if you just label it Bob Smith and Bob Smith buys more than one house for you, it's really kind of hard. You get all these Bob Smiths and you're trying to figure out which transaction it is. So I always recommend if you want to add the client name, just add dash in their name so that you can still, it's really more transaction specific that way. Now on this side, I want to apply my listing packet. I want all those forms to drop into place. If I apply the listing packet, it already knows that I'm the listing agent. And this is where the magic starts to happen. I don't want to import from the MLS. This time, I want to import from Realist the tax information. Now, when we first got this, I'm like, okay, that's great. And Brian's like, now all you have to do is put in the tax ID. And Brian is our chief technology officer. He's a great guy, but he's never sold a house in his life. And I actually said to him, do you think agents memorize tax IDs? Because we don't. We know addresses. So what we did is we put this little magnifying glass over here to the right. So in this case, all I would have to do is find the county and the street number and the street name. Now, I'm going to tell you, I would not recommend filling out anything except these three fields because tax records are so exact. If you put in, this happens to be Wessel Drive, for instance, if I put in Wessel Drive and the tax record is DR period, it's not going to pull properly. Tax records have to be so exact. So what I recommend, leave off the drives, the ways, the places, the circles, the courts, leave all those off. Think of it kind of like Google, less is best. Only add in the county, the street number, and the root street name, because if you put too much information, if you fill up the zip code and the tax number and the last name, and it's not an exact match, it won't pull it. So just by adding those three pieces of information, when I click search tax data, it immediately brings up the tax record. I'm going to select it. And now it's plugged in that tax ID. When I hit create, it's now going to take all that information from the municipality and it's going to start filling out my listing for me. So as you can see, year built, street name, school district, city, again, that same generic wizard we just looked at, legal description, township, all of that's auto-populating. The cool piece too, though, I'm just going to jump over to step 3 of our wizard, it also pulled in the seller's name. So if there's multiple sellers, it's also going to pull in multiple sellers. It labels them sellers, so it actually knows where to put the name, what signature goes under what signature line. And again, it can do that auto tagging. There's a couple really cool things I want to show you on the listing side. I'm not going to go too deep into the listing because the generic wizard is the same, but there are 2 really cool things on the listing side that I do want to make you aware of. I'm kind of a geek with technology. You can see I keep saying, oh, it's really cool. So one has to do with the data sheet. So let's take the actual workflow that agents go through, right? You've prepared all of your listing docs. You've got them ready, but nobody's signed them yet. So really, they're not really valuable yet, right? We need the signature on it. But one of the things I do recommend is filling out the pieces that you know, the listing agreement with as much data as you know. But when it comes to the data sheet, there's always a lot we don't know yet. Like I can fill a lot of this in right now, but I don't know what the final listing price is going to be because I haven't met with the seller yet, right? So this is one of those things I can't really fill out yet. Yes, I know a lot of this from the tax record, that it's a single family home, what the listing date's going to be. A lot of this I'm going to know, but there are going to be pieces I don't know, like the price. I might not know all of the features. And I certainly, if I haven't been there yet, I don't have the room measurements. But I will tell you, I really, really like this form because I find it for me, I have a little OCD and I'm kind of a type A personality. So I like to do everything myself, right? I like to put every detail in myself. I like to, because then if I screw it up, I know it's just me and it's my fault. But by filling this out, I can actually send all of this information over to Colleen, my admin, who could put it in on my behalf, or I could just send it into a listing status myself. So let me kind of break this down. So normally I've gone in here, I filled in my listing agreement, my documents, I've got 90% of it there, right? Because I'm going to take them and have them signed. I'm going to save this without having all of the data here yet. And the reason I'm going to do that is because once I've gone on the listing appointment and I now have those additional details, the room measurements, things like that, I can come back to this form, type in the remainder, and click Upload Listing. Now, as long as I filled in the red, which are required, what will happen is it sends all this to Paragon. So it does some really cool things. So let me kind of walk you through it. So I've gone on my listing appointment. My sellers signed all the documents. I've now gone back in and filled in the remaining unknowns on my data form. And I now want to hit this Upload Listing button. Now, here's what happens behind the scenes. Behind the scenes, it creates a partial listing. So I'm just going to kind of show you backwards here a little bit. The partial listings can be seen by your admin. So like Colleen at my office, who's our admin, she can actually see all of the office partials, which means I then pushed all that data for her to review it. She can go back in and she can say, okay, we'll use this one. Maybe she wants to add more photos on a particular one. Maybe she wants to check the comments or the remarks, or she wants to add something on your behalf. Those admins can go in and they can actually work on these properties on your behalf. If you're like me and you just want to do it yourself, well, that's okay too. So I'm going to close this one, because when you log in, you're going to see partials on your behalf. So I can see, okay, here's my 2 partial listings. I can go in and I can open them up. This is where I can go in and I can add pictures. By the way, you can upload up to 99 photos. You can drag and drop those photos into place. But this is where I basically can push all of the information from my data sheet and then just go in, add my seller's disclosure, my lead-based paint, and my photos. And I can hit save and make this listing live in the MLS. Now, it doesn't save it as a live listing right away. And here's the reason we do that. We actually do it on purpose. When you push that data over, it's pushing all of that data into a partial because you really want to add your photos first. And I did not know this. I'm just going to tell you from my pain. I got a call from a very, very unhappy seller that said, Colleen, you really screwed up. I'm on Zillow and I have been looking for a whole day and my photos are not there. And I was thinking, geez, that's really weird, because I put the photos in 5 minutes later, and you would think in 5 more minutes it would show up on Zillow. It doesn't really work that way, though. So photos work like this. Photos are high resolution. We actually have the highest in the state. So a lot of places like Realtor.com and Zillow, they will grab text changes, like if you have a change to a price or a status, or they will grab those every 15 minutes. But photos are so large that it takes a lot of bandwidth, and many places only pull those 24 to 48 hours. So it could literally be up to 2 days on Zillow with no photos. And we know what happens when that happens, right? The buyers go right past it. So this gives you the ability to push all the data to a partial listing so you can add your photos and then hit save and make your listing live. All right, looks like we have a couple other things I want to show you real quick too. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to jump back into our transaction desk. So when you actually have all this filled out, and I'm not going to do that for the sake of time today, when you've got all these red required filled out, it will even give you a partial number. So it'll show you it's been pushed over there. Now you can go in and add those additional pieces. One of the other things that I found in TransactionDesk that I haven't found in any other forms program is the seller's disclosure statement. So if you're like me, what generally happens is, you're filling out your listing paperwork with your seller. You hand them this form, and the seller, they have this deer in the headlight look, right? Because it's a lot of information. Generally what happens is I generally will go measure the rooms. And then I come back and inevitably there's like 9 scratch outs because they didn't realize the not available column existed and they put unknown. Or they're trying to find information about, the plumbing, or, hey, do you still have the warranty on the roof? They're going through all of that stuff and it takes forever. Now I go measure the rooms for the second time and they're still filling it out. So what TransactionDesk allows you to do is it allows you to send this form ahead of your appointment. So when you're looking at this, and By the way, I would only do this for the seller's disclosure because, quite honestly, we don't want our sellers filling out their listing agreement on their own, right? You just want to do this for a form that they would be completely filling out. We, as the agents, should not ever be filling out the disclosure statement. So when I send this, I'm going to say I'm going to send this to my seller. And I'm going to say that I am meeting with that seller tomorrow. So I am checking off the seller's disclosure. I'm going to hit OK. I got a new mouse, so it's a little temperamental. And I'm going to send this to Sally Seller. And I'm going to put in Sally Seller's email address here. And you could put a subject line in. So maybe I want to say, looking forward to our listing appointment tomorrow at 4. But what I want to do now is I want to send it as a live link, but I want them to be able to fill out this form. So if I'm coming over, let's say I'm coming over on Friday, I want to make sure they filled it out by Thursday so that I get it back and I can have it with all of the other listing documents. So I'm going to send this in an editable way. So when they get this, they're actually able to, just like I can, they're able to go in and literally check, or if they make a mistake, they didn't realize they're not available, they can uncheck it, they can fill out the fields themselves. So it's going to be very, very easy for them. Now, I always say that, when you're looking at TransactionDesk, there's a lot there. And I was really concerned when I sent my first one out, well, is it going to be overwhelming for my seller? The answer is actually your seller gets a easy to view. I'm just going to show you in my Yahoo email here. They get a really easy to view version. So I'm just gonna, usually takes about 30 seconds for it to come in. So hopefully it'll be pretty quick. Okay. So when the email actually comes to the seller for them to fill out their seller's disclosure, it comes from you, the agent, because they have no idea who TransactionDesk is. They don't know who Authentisign is. They do know that you're their trusted agent. So it has my contact information at the bottom, my phone number, email address, some basic instructions in my branding so they know who it came from. They click into the form itself, and they get a very streamlined version. All of that complicated stuff goes away. They can save it. They can save it as a PDF. Or if they hit save, it comes back to you via an email, and it goes right back into your transaction so that you can print that document out and obviously take it with you to your listing appointment. Or you could choose to send it for e-signatures after that. A lot of times I will get a question, can you send it for an e-signature when they're filling it out? And the answer is no. So part of the being legal and binding in all 50 states is that it has to meet certain regulatory disclosures. And in order to be UTA compliant, which means it's legal and binding in all 50 states and meet the e-sign act, one thing it has to be is a locked document. But you're doing just the opposite right now. You're unlocking the document so you can fill it out. So what happens is it comes back in that unlocked format. But if you choose to hit the e-signature button, it will lock it down for you. But it is an extra step. So I just want to point that out. When they get it, they can print a copy, they can save a copy, they can blow it up. But literally, as you can see, they can go in. If they make a mistake, they can deselect something. The fields are open. So if they need to type something into the field, it then returns it so you see it as the agent. And of course, then you could resend it for signatures if you wanted to at that point. It's pretty easy. They get a really easy version. Just gonna go ahead and leave there. And it comes again from you so that they recognize it. So hopefully that makes sense. All right, jumping back to our agent version. So those are really the two big differences on the listing side. One, you want to pull in from the tax records. Two, use that data sheet to auto-populate it to Paragon. Because I don't know about you, but if you've ever gone into Paragon to add listings, it's a little more work going in this way. So if I start a new listing, yeah, you could tax autofill it, but look at all of these fields. And sometimes I'm not really, I have to be totally honest, sometimes the name of the field is not always clear, like the ZL source of the square feet. Yes, you could figure it out by clicking into it, but it's so nice on that easy to read data sheet to just push everything over. I find it is half the amount of time doing it that way. So I do all of my listings from the data sheet to the MLS. So hopefully that's making sense. Okay, so we've talked about the listing side, we've talked about the sales side. What about the signing side? So how about that e-signing? How do you get those documents that you've now put into the purchase agreement, or you on the listing side? How are you getting those over to clients to sign easily? And the answer is there's a couple different ways. What I find is easiest is over here on the left where the pen icon is. This will be all of your signing. Think of signing as an envelope, right? Each one of these envelopes has the documents inside, and each one of them belongs in a transactional folder, right? Just like the big deal file folders. Geez, I think I have one here. The big deal file folders where you can grab one and stick all your transaction documents inside. The whole point is this is no different. It's just doing it paperlessly. So what we're going to do is we're going to hit the add. And where it says add to transaction optional, I never want you to think of that as optional. I want you to always tie it to the transaction, because if it's an addendum, it belongs in a transaction. When you're trying to find it, you want it to automatically float back into that file. You don't want to have to find things and move them. The days of that are over. So we're going to say that this is going to be part of, what do we call it? I think it was the ERKI transaction. So I'm going to click on my transaction list, and I see my ERKI transaction here. And I want to call it purchase docs for that file. Okay, now it's tied to that file. Anything they sign goes right back into the file without me having to move it or touch it in any way. All right, so this got streamlined just, I think, less than a year ago. It's now has higher resolution documents, easier to counter. It's easier than it used to be. But basically, all you're doing is telling it who's going to sign and what they're going to sign. So let's start there. Who's going to actually sign the documents? Well, if you did all the hard work like we did earlier, the person's name and email address, when you added the contact, it's already there. So you're just going to pull the participants right from the transaction. So in this case, I am sending it to Barry and Bertha Buyer. Maybe I want to witness it as well. So I can check off Barry, I can check off my name, but if I also wanted to send it to the listing agent, oh, it's a cute email address for, I didn't even realize that. If I wanted to send it to the co-oping agent as well, well, I could actually include her. So after our signing is complete, it goes to her. Here's the trick though. If I just select all three of these parties, they're all going to get it at the same time. The problem is then Margaret, the listing agent, could get it before my buyer signed it. So that would not make any sense. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put them in a signing order. I'm going to say I want Barry, the buyer, to sign first. I then want it to go to me. And then when it's all complete, I want it to go to the co-oping agent. The other thing I think that's a little bit confusing is the roles. And it's really just how are they reviewing this document? So the listing agent really probably isn't going to be signing, right? She's just going to get it when it's all complete. The other thing is the buyer is going to be our signer. But if you have an attorney and the attorney says, I'm not going to sign the documents, but I want to review them before they go to my client, there's even a reviewer role. Now, keep in mind, this is not like CC on an email. It only will send it to the CC if all the parties you've elected have signed it. It's perfect for title companies or lenders. The title company or lender, they generally don't want to know about the transaction until everything is signed, right? So by adding the title company or lender as a CC, and you can even include a private message, they don't get anything until the deal has come together. Then it's delivered to the title company with your private message. So that's kind of the benefit. So in this case, I'm going to CC the listing agent. I'm going to say that I'm going to witness and Barry Buyer's going to be signing. So I'm going to pick those three, and here's where I'm actually putting them in the order. So I want to have Barry first and then Colleen second. I have to say, you do want to check your signing order. I had a really nice lady who called me after she took my class. I was driving home, and she was in tears. She was brand new to real estate. She had sent her purchase agreement to the buyer 12 times. And of course, she's new. She didn't want it to look like she was new. And the problem was she had her in the first roll. So because she never signed it, it could not go to the buyer. So once I pulled over and logged in, we were able to see and just switch those roles around, which now allowed her buyer to get it and sign it properly, and then it went to her. So keep in mind, if they're not getting it, this is one of the first things you want to check is, do you have them in the right order? The other thing you want to do is, what forms do you want them to sign? Now, here's where it gets wonderful, because the seller's disclosure, the lead-based paint disclosure, all of those things that migrated over, they're all going to be here. So not just your documents, but that seller's disclosure that the seller filled out, that purchase agreement that we filled out, all of those are here. And you can literally just click add. If you forgot to add something, you can also upload it here. This last one I don't use very often, but let me tell you what it's for. If you have a deal that died, so let's say Mr. Kraft had 123 Main Street, his buyers wrote an offer. At the home inspection, unfortunately, it died. But he has the copy of the EMD, he has the pre-approval, the buyer's agency, all in that folder. The last thing he wants to do is delete that folder or have to rescan everything into a new folder. So what this allows you to do is literally grab transaction documents from another transaction and copy them into this transaction. So if you have a deal that died, let's say it's your listing, 123 Main Street, the first deal died, but you now are taking a second offer. You can pull documents in, you can copy things from other transaction files that you have. So it just makes it more convenient to have one file with everything in it. Some people still do the buy and sell on separate. I find that very confusing. Even if I represented both parties, I want them in one transaction. I want to see everything. And that's where being able to separate it with subfolders or versions is very helpful. All right, so here's our documents. My buyer is obviously going to initial here at the bottom. So I'm going to go to my tools. Here's my buyer's initial, and I'm simply going to drag it onto the document. At the bottom, he's going to actually sign. And I want to also have him auto date it. So the auto date works like this, by the way. It will auto date for when they sign. So if they sign today, it's going to have today's date. If they sign tomorrow, it will have tomorrow's date. Oops, I put that in the time. You can also do the auto time, which is right here. And there's some really cool ones, like you can do optional initials. You can do drop downs. So let's say on your home warranty line, you want one drop down to be a yes, one drop down to be a no. You can actually do that. On your purchase agreement, if you have a purchase agreement like this that's really long and you don't want to have to set up the buyer's initials for the husband and wife on every page, you can do initial pages. And this is kind of cool because what it does is it lets you pick the size. It lets you pick what part of the document they're going to initial. And I'm going to say that my Barry buyer is going to initial on the right. And I'm just going to have them initial the purchase agreement. If you're, I think it's Century 21 Town and Country, I believe it is, they initial every other page. So you can even choose the pages that they're going to initial, or maybe they don't initial, they just sign on the last page. You can actually put that right here. But when I hit place initials, the nice thing about this is I don't have to go and add each party. It will actually just do that. Yes, you do have to kind of straighten them because I have OCD. I mean, I guess you don't have to, but I would not be able to sleep at night if it was looking like that. So if you just scroll down, you'll find it's on the bottom of every page, and you can simply just tweak it instead of clicking to grab the action, dragging it over, changing the buyer name to the wife now, clicking to add. It's a lot easier to just have them drop into place. Radio buttons are another one. This is if you make things optional, like optional checkboxes or optional initials. The problem with that is if it is a buyer or seller signing, they generally click both because they don't know what these forms are a lot of times asking for. So what I recommend is using the radio buttons, which literally just give them a choice. Are you going to have a home warranty? or are you not going to have a home warranty? They're only allowed to choose one. And yes, you can add more. You can copy the buttons and place 3, 4, or 5, but they can only select one of the options. It will gray out the other. So I think that that's very helpful as well. All you're doing literally is going in and you are setting up where each party is going to sign. For the sake of time, I'm just going to do it very quickly here. And let's say Barry Buyer is going to sign right next to me. I'm just dragging those tags into place. Many of the forms, all of the association forms are tagged, but let me explain that, especially for mine. I know Mr. Kraft is probably thinking, wait, you said it was going to tag a lot of these. For our library at the brokerage I'm at, we just redid all of our forms, I think less than 10 days ago. There were some new rules and some new things that our attorney wanted us to add. So we went in and changed a lot of the forms, some of the language even. And so they have to be re-tagged for the brokerage. A brokerage can actually go in and place all of the tags where they want the seller to sign, the purchase, and every time you pull that document up, it's auto tagged, which I love. Mine, unfortunately, I couldn't show you that today because we just changed all of our forms. But if you are a broker, keep in mind, you want to really have those things already tagged for the agents. That allows them to not miss a signature, and it also allows them to, let's say, make sure that the buyer's signing in the right place and the seller is signing in the right place. You can also go in and set up layouts or your own tagging. So if you want them always, if you wanted your name to fall on one side of the document or tags to fall in for your buyer at certain places, you can actually set those up on your own through the layouts as well. All right, and I know I'm a couple of minutes over, so the good news is you've gone through, you've added your signing blocks where you want everyone to sign. It's now ready to be sent. If you wanted to include an optional message for any of the parties, you could do that under custom invites. So again, if you've added a lender or a title company and you want them to have a specific message, like please start title right away, or please start pre-title, you can actually include that. Only that party is going to see that message. Okay. And then last, I'm just going to go ahead and hit send, and it's on the way for that buyer now to sign. So if I go up to my email, just a couple of seconds as that buyer, you can see I now have it from the agent again, because they don't know who Authentisign is. And all I'm doing at this point is clicking Start Signing. I'm going to tell them that it is a legal binding signature in all 50 states. It does meet the UTA compliancy. And on their side, all they have to do is hit Start, and it's going to apply their signature in every place. I've already set up my signature, but it does give them the option to draw out their signature the first time or use a pre-generated font. It's simple, it's easy, and it literally takes them to every single place that you, the agent, have set up for signatures. Now, I do tell my clients to read it over first, but scroll through and read the entirety because it kind of jumps them around on the signatures. So I tell them read it over first and then go ahead and go through the signing process. Here's that radio button, selecting one or the other, and just clicking to add those things into place. All right, so hopefully that seems pretty easy. I ran about 6 minutes over right now. So let me show you where you're going to find this class recording. So what we've done is we've created a YouTube channel where we record all of our classes. So if you miss anything, you can go right to our YouTube channel and you can click on the playlist and it will show you all of the classes. So if you were looking for today's class, you're going to look under Transaction Desk. So you're going to go to playlist, you're going to go to Transaction Desk, or if you wanted information on Cuba Casa, our new floor plan program, market stats, showing time, you're just going to find that particular class list. So we'd go to Transaction Desk, and at the end it will have the date. Sorry about that. It'll have the date next to it. So you'll look for today's date and you can watch this whole class over. And you're probably thinking, well, what is your YouTube channel and how do I find it? Well, what we did to make that simpler, so you don't have to type it out, right inside Paragon in your agent toolbox that I keep referring to, let me close all that, you have resources. Resources has right underneath, under the education section, it will have recorded webinars. So if you want to go right to the YouTube channel, you don't have to remember the long channel title. You can just click on recorded webinars and it will take you right there. So just remember Paragon, resources, and it will take you directly to that YouTube channel. Click on playlists and you can find all of our classes as we record all of them except our admin welcome, our new agent welcome, and our photos class. Pretty much everything else is there. And photo, we do that a little more hands-on, so that's why. But again, you'll find that under playlists. If you do have any questions, there'll be an email that will follow up this webinar. So if I missed any of your questions, a couple of them I might have to reach back out just because we ran out of time. But if I've missed any of your questions, feel free to type them in to the email that will follow up with this webinar. I do appreciate your time. Sorry that I ran a couple of minutes over. Hopefully you picked up some great time-saving tips and techniques when using Transaction Desk, making it a little easier. We do have support that, again, is available 7 days a week. You can also find all of the support information right under resources, same place. You can find the help button, which is right up here at the top. You can also go to resources where we have some great, all the support numbers are listed there as well. And then there's also the Paragon Academy and some other cool things. So support, click on help, it'll take you right there. Other than that, thanks so much for your time. I will reach up. I think I had one unanswered question. I tried to stay on top of them all today. I had one unanswered question, but I will follow that up. And I hope you have a great day. Happy selling, everybody. Thanks again.